Did you know that over 95% of human decisions are made subconsciously, long before logic even has a chance to intervene? That's why relationships with narcissists feel less like choices and more like addictions. And here's the shocking part. Neuroscientists discovered that uncertainty can boost dopamine release in the brain by up to 400%. This means that the same unpredictability that keeps you hooked on a narcissist can be reversed, making them hooked on you. So the real question is, how to make a narcissist obsess over you? Not through manipulation, not through begging, but by using psychology, philosophy, and neuroscience to flip the script. We're going to dive into the hidden mechanisms of obsession: control, silence, and presence, tools that can rewire the narcissist's mind against their own ego. But before we get into the heart of it, make me a sign. Like this video, share it, drop a thank you in the comments, or hit subscribe. Carl Jung once said that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Freud added that human behavior is rarely rational, but instead driven by hidden desires that even we don't fully understand. And when we bring in modern neuroscience, the numbers are staggering. Studies show that more than 95% of our decisions are made subconsciously, shaped by emotional triggers long before logic enters the room. If you've ever wondered why a narcissist seems to live rent-free in your mind, or why you feel an almost magnetic pull toward them, even when you know they are toxic, the answer lies in this deep territory where psychology and biology collide. Think about obsession, not as a feeling, but as a chemical storm in the brain. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation, spikes when something feels unpredictable. The narcissist, with their hot and cold behavior, creates exactly that unpredictability. Neuroscientists at Harvard found that uncertainty increases dopamine release by up to 400%. This means that when a narcissist praises you one moment and criticizes you the next, your brain gets hooked not despite the roller coaster but because of it. You start craving the reward, not realizing that it's the inconsistency itself that wires your nervous system to keep chasing. Philosophers understood this long before brain scans existed. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the mind becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and Seneca warned that nothing enslaves us more than our passions. If you're listening right now, you've probably felt that pull. You've asked yourself, why am I still thinking about them? Why does it matter so much if they text back or not? The truth is that obsession is not weakness, it's design. You are wired to seek patterns, and when the pattern is broken, you focus on it obsessively. Narcissists exploit this. But here's where Freud's ideas still resonate. He believed that we are all searching for validation of our deepest childhood wounds. When a narcissist withdraws affection, it touches exactly that wound, and your unconscious interprets it as life or death. That's why it feels impossible to let go. Jung expanded this idea with his concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny or repress. The narcissist reflects these shadows back at us, making us both drawn to and repelled by them. Suddenly you see why it's not about the narcissist at all, but about the mirror they hold up to your hidden self. Neuroscience supports this with what we now call mirror neurons, cells in the brain that fire both when we act and when we observe someone else acting. These neurons explain why we can feel someone's emotions just by looking at them. In a relationship with a narcissist, your mirror neurons make you internalize their moods. You begin to obsess because their state becomes your state. And once that happens, detaching feels like amputating a part of yourself. You might be wondering, is there any way to break this cycle or even reverse it so that they become obsessed with you instead? The answer is layered. First, understanding the mechanism already gives you an edge. When you know that obsession is a dopamine feedback loop, you can control the variables. Second, philosophers like Epictetus remind us that no man is free who is not master of himself. Mastery begins with awareness. Every time you notice the pull, you've taken one step outside the cage. Third, and perhaps most powerful, is the paradox of obsession itself. The less available you are, the more the narcissist's brain interprets you as a source of unpredictable reward. Just as you were caught by their inconsistency, they can be caught by yours. Nietzsche once wrote that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Apply this to your own situation. If your why is to reclaim your power, to no longer be the one consumed, then you can endure the discomfort of silence, of distance, of breaking the cycle. And the fascinating part is that neuroscientific studies on attachment show that when one partner withdraws attention, the other's craving intensifies. It's not magic, it's biology. What once chained, you can become the very chain you turn back on them. So the psychology of obsession is not a mystery, it is a blueprint. Jung mapped the unconscious, Freud traced the roots of desire, philosophers gave us warnings, and neuroscience provides the data. When you connect them all, you realize that obsession is not fate, it's a pattern, and any pattern can be rewritten. Sigmund Freud once argued that all human behavior can be traced back to the tension between our desire for pleasure and our fear of pain. Carl Jung added that those who cannot control their inner chaos seek to control the outer world. Modern psychology confirms it. Narcissists are driven not by love but by control. Studies from the Journal of Personality Disorders reveal that over 70% of individuals with high narcissistic traits admit to using manipulation as a way to maintain dominance in relationships. This is not about affection, it is about possession. If you have ever felt that a narcissist wants you not for who you are, but for the power they feel when you revolve around them, you are not imagining it. Control for a narcissist is oxygen. Without it, they suffocate. They need you to doubt yourself because your self-doubt is their leverage. Neuroscientists explain that the brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone, when you feel uncertain or invalidated. Cortisol weakens your decision-making, making you more suggestible. Narcissists thrive here. They create an environment where you're constantly questioning your worth so they can position themselves as the one with answers, the one with the authority, and the cycle deepens because the more you seek their approval, the more control they gain. But this cycle is not invincible. Stoic philosophers like Epictetus remind us that no one can enslave you unless you first hand them the key. The key is attention. What a narcissist fears most is indifference, because their control depends on your emotional reaction. Think about it. When you argue, when you justify yourself, when you seek their recognition, you are giving them the energy they crave. That energy fuels their sense of dominance. But when you respond with calm, when you refuse to feed the storm, you disrupt the system. Neuroscience backs this. Emotional detachment activates the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking. It allows you to step outside the grip of cortisol and reclaim your clarity. Let's go deeper. Nietzsche believed that whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. This is crucial. Disrupting the narcissist's cycle doesn't mean becoming manipulative yourself. It means refusing to play the game by their rules. One strategy backed by psychological research is called the gray rock method. Becoming uninteresting, emotionally neutral, a blank surface they cannot exploit. At first, they will resist, expect anger, expect guilt tripping. But over time, their need for stimulation will push them elsewhere, unless they start obsessing over the very wall you've built, trying desperately to break through. There is also a paradox here. Neuroscientific studies on reward systems show that the human brain is addicted to unpredictability. If you stop reacting in predictable ways, sometimes responding warmly, sometimes with silence, you invert the dynamic. Suddenly, it is the narcissist who starts craving your attention, because they can no longer anticipate you. The very weapon they used against you becomes the trap they fall into. History gives us powerful examples. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, faced endless attempts from courtiers and rivals to control him. Yet his meditations show a man who understood that true power lies in governing the self. He did not react to every insult, nor chase every whisper of approval. He chose when to engage and when to remain silent. This is the essence of disrupting control, realizing that your silence, your boundaries, your refusal to be moved are not signs of weakness, but of mastery. You might still ask yourself, will this really work? The answer is yes, because you are rewiring not just your behavior, but the entire feedback loop of the relationship. When you stop feeding the narcissist's need for control, their brain enters a state of cognitive dissonance. They expected dominance but met resistance. They expected submission but met silence. Cognitive dissonance is uncomfortable, and the mind seeks to resolve it. That's when obsession begins. They start thinking about you, trying to solve the puzzle of why they cannot bend you as they did before. So why do narcissists crave control? Because control fills the void inside them. The emptiness Freud described as the endless pursuit of ego satisfaction. How do you disrupt it? By refusing to give what they want most, your emotional compliance. By becoming unpredictable, detached and firmly anchored in yourself. Remember what Seneca said, "He who has power over himself has power over all." And that includes the power to make the narcissist, for the first time, feel the desperate pull of obsession they once forced upon you. In a world addicted to noise, silence becomes magnetic. Eckhart Tolle wrote that true power is found in presence, in the stillness behind thought. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the universe is change, and our response is our only possession. What does this mean in the context of a narcissist? It means that when you embody presence, calm, composed, unattached, you create a force they cannot dominate. And paradoxically, the less you try to impress, the more they obsess over understanding you. Science confirms what philosophy has always suggested. Studies on interpersonal attraction reveal that people are 62% more likely to feel intrigued by someone who maintains composed silence in social interactions, rather than filling every gap with words. Neuroscientists explain this through the amygdala. When someone doesn't react predictably, the brain flags them as a mystery, a potential source of unknown reward. Narcissists whose minds thrive on conquest cannot resist a puzzle. Your silence makes you the puzzle. Think of presence not as absence, but as density. When you enter a room fully grounded in yourself, your breath steady, your eyes calm, you occupy space differently. People feel it. Even before words are spoken, they sense an energy that commands attention. The Stoics trained for this. Seneca practiced rehearsing loss, reminding himself that life's external events are beyond his control, so that nothing could shake his core. The result was a presence so unshakable that even chaos could not intrude. This kind of presence confuses a narcissist. They expect your emotions to rise and fall with their manipulations, but when you remain steady, you rob them of the control they crave, and in its place grows curiosity, even obsession. Carl Jung wrote that people don't meet by accident. Each encounter reveals something about ourselves. With narcissists, what they reveal is our capacity to detach, to anchor in silence. Your presence forces them to confront the emptiness inside. They project, they provoke, but you do not dance to the music. That refusal, that magnetic silence creates tension. And humans are wired to resolve tension. It gnaws at them, pulls their thoughts back to you, even when they try to dismiss you. Real-world examples prove this. Negotiation experts like Chris Voss, a former FBI hostage negotiator, describe silence as one of the most powerful tools in human interaction. He notes that when you pause after someone speaks, the discomfort forces them to reveal more than they intended. With a narcissist, your silence forces them to fill the void, to chase the reaction they cannot get. Every unanswered message, every calm gaze, every unshaken response becomes fuel for their obsession. Nietzsche once wrote that the greatest events, they are not our loudest but our stillest hours. Apply this here. When you embrace stillness, you shift the balance of power. The narcissist feeds on drama, but your refusal to perform deprives them of nourishment. Their mind, conditioned by unpredictability, begins to circle around you. Why don't you react? Why don't you argue? Why does your silence feel heavier than their words? The questions spiral, and with them, their fixation deepens. Presence also changes you. Neuroscience shows that mindfulness practices reduce cortisol levels by up to 30% and increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational control. This isn't just about confusing the narcissist. It's about liberating yourself from their grip. By cultivating inner stillness, you weaken the hooks of manipulation. You stop being a participant in their drama and become the calm center around which they spin. And because humans are drawn to stability, they start gravitating toward the very strength they cannot shake. Socrates taught that the unexamined life is not worth living. In your silence you examine. You observe their patterns without being consumed. You learn that presence is not passive but active resistance. It is the art of saying without words, "You do not control me, and because of that, you will keep returning to me in your mind." So, the power of presence is not mystical. It is psychological, neurological, and deeply human. The Stoics knew it, the philosophers wrote it, and modern science proves it. By choosing silence over reaction, you don't just protect yourself. You create the magnetic field that draws the narcissist closer, not because you chased them, but because you dared to stop playing the game. That is the paradox of power. It grows strongest when you appear to use it least. Freud once observed that we are never more defenseless against suffering than when we love. Carl Jung warned that the things we are most attached to often reveal our deepest shadows. Neuroscience adds another layer. Attachment bonds release oxytocin, the so-called bonding hormone, and the more inconsistent the relationship, the stronger that chemical hook becomes. This is why breaking free from a narcissist feels almost impossible. You're not just walking away from a person, you're breaking a biochemical loop. But what if instead of trying to escape that loop through force, you redirected it? What if detachment itself became your weapon? Detachment is not indifference, it is the art of feeling without being consumed. Stoic philosophers like Epictetus taught that we cannot control external events, only our responses. When you begin to practice emotional detachment, you step outside the narcissist's script. They expect rage, tears, pleading. These reactions confirm their dominance. But when you respond with calm observation, you short-circuit the program. They no longer get the validation that their manipulation works, and this confuses their mind. Confusion breeds obsession. Neuroscience supports this. Studies on habit formation show that when a predictable stimulus no longer produces the expected reward, the brain enters what's called an extinction burst. The subject, whether human or animal, tries harder, repeating the behavior more intensely in an effort to restore the missing reward. This is exactly what happens when you detach. The narcissist escalates, probing, pushing, desperate to regain the emotional reactions you once provided. In this struggle, their thoughts circle around you more than ever, because you've disrupted the loop they rely on for validation. Consider Marcus Aurelius, who faced betrayal and flattery in equal measure as Emperor of Rome. His meditations reveal a man who trained himself to rise above both praise and blame, anchoring in a higher perspective. This is emotional detachment in action, refusing to let external chaos decide your internal state. Applied to the narcissist, this looks like staying steady when they insult you, remaining calm when they try to provoke jealousy, even smiling faintly when they expect you to break. Each time you hold that ground, you reprogram the dynamic. Carl Jung's concept of individuation also speaks here. He believed that true growth happens when we integrate the unconscious parts of ourselves instead of projecting them outward. Detachment allows you to see the narcissist's behavior for what it is, a projection of their own wounds, without taking it personally. This doesn't just protect you, it fascinates them. They sense they can't reach you the way they reach others, and that sense of distance becomes a challenge they cannot ignore. There are real-world testimonies that illustrate this. Psychotherapists working with survivors of narcissistic abuse often note that once a victim practices consistent emotional neutrality, the narcissist's interest paradoxically increases. One patient described how her ex, who once ignored her messages, began flooding her with calls and visits once she stopped reacting at all. This isn't love, it's the extinction burst in real time, the craving of a brain denied its usual hit of control. Nietzsche captured the essence of detachment when he wrote, "Become who you are." To detach is to return to yourself, to refuse to let another define your identity. And here lies the paradox. The more you anchor in yourself, the more the narcissist loses their anchor. They begin to obsess, not because you chase them, but because you've become untouchable. From a neuroscience perspective, emotional detachment also strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the brain's command center. This region is responsible for rational decisions, impulse control, and long-term vision. Functional MRI scans show that mindfulness practices, which cultivate detachment, Increase activity in this region while reducing amygdala reactivity. In simple terms, you stop being triggered and you start choosing. Each choice builds your resilience, and each display of resilience makes the narcissist's attempts at control less effective and more maddening to them. So, detachment is not withdrawal, nor is it coldness. It is the refusal to fuel the narcissist's control with your emotions. It is choosing silence over shouting, clarity over chaos, composure over collapse. And the strange beauty is that in doing so, you don't just free yourself. You create the very conditions that reprogram the narcissist's mind. They expected compliance and found resistance. They expected chaos and found calm. That gap becomes unbearable, and in their need to close it, they begin to revolve around you. Detachment, then, is not escape. It is mastery. A weapon forged not from hate, but from discipline. The weapon that turns their obsession against them. In the early 1990s, Italian neuroscientists made a discovery that changed how we understand human connection. They identified special brain cells called mirror neurons, neurons that fire not only when we act, but also when we observe someone else acting. If you watch someone smile, your mirror neurons light up as if you were smiling yourself. If you see someone in pain, your brain registers that pain almost as if it were your own. These cells explain empathy, imitation, even cultural learning. But here is where it becomes powerful in the context of a narcissist. Their ego can be turned against them through the very mechanism that binds us together. Carl Jung believed that we project onto others the parts of ourselves we cannot face. Freud wrote that our interactions with others are often rehearsals of our inner conflicts. When these ideas meet the science of mirror neurons, a fascinating dynamic emerges. Narcissists project grandiosity, control, superiority. But mirror neurons work both ways. When you remain composed, self-assured, detached, their brain involuntarily mirrors aspects of that energy, even if they resist consciously. They sense the shift in power, not because you argue louder, but because your state of being forces their nervous system to respond. Neuroscience offers numbers to back this up. Studies show that mirror neurons are activated in less than 200 milliseconds, faster than conscious thought. This means you don't need to explain your calm or justify your silence. Your very presence communicates it at a biological level. A narcissist, primed to dominate through emotional contagion, suddenly finds themselves influenced by you instead. Your serenity unsettles them, and the unsettling becomes fascination. Think about it in practice. When a narcissist raises their voice, expecting anger in return, but you stay calm, your lack of reaction is mirrored back to them. Their nervous system feels the dissonance. They cannot process why you aren't matching their chaos. This confusion often leads to obsession because the human brain craves congruence. It wants to resolve contradictions. You become the contradiction they cannot solve. Marcus Aurelius lived surrounded by senators, generals, and schemers, many of whom sought to manipulate him. Yet in his writings he reflects on staying steady so that others unconsciously attune to his calm. This is mirror neurons in action, long before the science was named. By embodying stability, he made others feel the weight of his presence. You can do the same. The narcissist expects to set the emotional tone, but when you take control of that tone, without words, you reverse the dynamic. Nietzsche said, "He who cannot command himself will always be a servant." Mirror neurons prove this scientifically. If you command yourself, your breath, your expression, your silence, you indirectly command others, because their brains cannot help but mirror you. The narcissist, who feeds on control, now feels controlled by the very composure they cannot shake. And because their ego cannot tolerate losing dominance, they become obsessed with trying to decode you. Real-world psychology experiments illustrate this. In studies on negotiation, subjects who mirrored the posture and tone of their counterpart were rated as significantly more persuasive and trustworthy. But when researchers flipped the dynamic, when subjects remained neutral, unreactive, participants reported feeling strangely compelled to win approval. This is exactly how the narcissist's obsession grows. When they cannot infect you with their chaos, they feel the pull to match your calm. Eckhart Tolle teaches that presence is not taught, it is transmitted. Mirror neurons are the biological engine behind this. When you embody presence, The narcissist feels it involuntarily. They may scoff, they may deny, but deep down, their nervous system responds. They start to orbit around your steadiness, just as planets orbit a gravitational force they cannot escape. And here lies the paradox. The narcissist's ego, designed to dominate, becomes trapped in your field of influence. They obsess not because you gave them power, but because you took it away silently. Their mirror neurons betray them, forcing them to resonate with the very strength they sought to undermine. So when you face the storm of manipulation, remember this. You don't need louder words or sharper arguments. You need presence. You need silence. You need control of yourself, because biology will do the rest. The narcissist's mind, driven by ego, will begin to mirror what it cannot master. And in that mirror, obsession takes root. Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Freud added that every relationship is an exchange of hidden motives, a theater where needs and fears collide. Neuroscience now gives us the data to prove it. Humans spend nearly 47% of their waking hours with their minds wandering, replaying past interactions or anticipating future ones. And when a narcissist is involved, that mental replay intensifies. But here is the turning point. Once you understand the psychology of obsession, the cycle of control, the power of presence, and the role of mirror neurons, you no longer have to play defense. You can step into mastery. Mastery begins with awareness. You now know that obsession is not random. It is dopamine chasing unpredictability. You know that narcissists crave control because control feeds their fragile ego. You know that silence and presence disrupt their rhythm, and that mirror neurons betray their resistance by forcing them to respond to your calm. Each of these insights is a tool, and when you combine them, you stop surviving the dynamic and start directing it. Consider Marcus Aurelius leading an empire while surrounded by schemers. His strength did not come from dominating every rival, but from mastering himself so completely that others adjusted around him. This is mastery. You no longer revolve around the narcissist, they revolve around you. Your detachment, your presence, your unpredictability, all create a gravitational pull. And because their ego cannot tolerate uncertainty, they begin to obsess, trying to decode you, trying to regain the control you quietly withdrew. Modern neuroscience explains why this works. The brain's reward system, fueled by dopamine, is most active in the face of intermittent reinforcement. When you stop giving predictable reactions, sometimes warm, sometimes distant, you trigger the same craving loop that once trapped you. But now, you are the one holding the lever. You can choose when to engage and when to withdraw. The narcissist, unable to anticipate you, becomes hooked on the very unpredictability they once weaponized. But mastery is not cruelty. Stoicism reminds us that the goal is freedom, not revenge. Epictetus said that no man is free who is not master of himself. By stepping into mastery, you reclaim your freedom first. You stop being a puppet pulled by strings of validation and fear. And paradoxically, it is precisely this freedom that makes the narcissist obsess. They sense you are beyond their reach, and the unattainable is irresistible to the ego. Real testimonies echo this truth. Therapists report that when survivors of narcissistic abuse rebuild their sense of self, focusing on hobbies, friendships, passions, the narcissist often reappears, desperate to reassert control. But what draws them back is not the same vulnerability as before. It is the strength, the independence, the mastery. They want what they can no longer command. This is the ultimate inversion of power. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Your why is no longer about pleasing or surviving the narcissist. It is about living in alignment with yourself. When you embody that why, through silence, through detachment, through mastery, you radiate an energy that no manipulation can break. And because narcissists are addicted to control, they cannot resist circling back, obsessing, chasing the enigma you have become. Mastery also means choice. You are no longer trapped in their cycle, but you can choose to use the dynamic to your advantage. In negotiation, in business, in relationships, the one who controls their own reactions controls the game. By mastering your mind, you force the narcissist into reaction mode, where they are weakest. Their ego demands that they keep pursuing, and that pursuit becomes their obsession. So what began as defense, the desperate attempt to protect yourself, evolves into mastery, where you no longer just resist but shape the entire dynamic. Philosophy, psychology, neuroscience all converge on the same truth. The greatest power lies in governing yourself. When you embody that, the narcissist cannot help but orbit you, not because you begged for their attention, but because you became the rarest thing in their world, someone they cannot control. That is the final transformation, from defense to mastery, from victim to strategist, from being obsessed over them to making them obsess over you.